My mother violently rejected every woman in my life, and when I finally brought home my girlfriend, she launched a campaign to destroy us. But her obsession exposed her dark secret, and I made sure she'd never hurt anyone again. My mom always told me that she comes first before any other girl, especially my wife. I knew I would get married one day, but I always looked for women that I thought my mother would like. In high school, I had crushes on different girls, but my mom denied all of them. I showed her pictures of them after school, and she would swipe no like she was on Tinder. She'd then kiss me on the cheek and told me to stop worrying about all that. The only girl you need is your mama. I knew deep down that what she was doing was wrong, but I pushed it away because I never wanted to make my mom upset. Fast forward 7 years later, I'm now 26, and at the last family gathering, I brought over my first ever girlfriend. I was positive she would be the girl my mom accepted. She was studying to be a veterinarian, was drop-dead gorgeous, and was a national level swimmer in high school. She kept reassuring me that things would be okay, and that my mom would love her. For a second, I actually believed her. So when I knocked on my parents' door, I had more confidence than ever. But then my mom opened the door. "Hey mom, I would like you to meet my girlfriend Kate." "What is this a word doing here with my precious baby boy?" she interrupted, yelling. Both mine and Kate's faces deflated, and I tried to say something. "Mom, please just give her a chance." "No, she doesn't get to just come into our house. She knows she's not good enough for you, doesn't she?" She turned to Kate. I saw Kate holding back tears, and I felt so many emotions overcome me at once. Anger, embarrassment, hatred, everything. I told Kate we were going back to my car, and as I took her hand, my mom began speaking again. "Where are you going, honey? You're coming in. It's only this W word who can't." I stood in shock. I wanted to scream, but I kept my mouth shut and walked back to the car with Kate. My mom's voice got louder the more we walked away, as she was now getting angry at me for choosing Kate over her. The second we got back to my car, Kate broke down. She started crying, telling me this has never happened to her before, and she lunged into me asking if she was really such a bad girlfriend. I reassured her, and it's while I was holding her that I asked myself something. If I was my mom, would I raise my son and treat my girlfriend the way she does? And the answer was no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't have this weird, borderline gross obsession of isolating me from every single girl who has come near me. I wouldn't have stopped me from going to my favorite band's concert when I was 17 because my female cousin was going. I wouldn't have demanded I attend a boys-only high school. I wouldn't have shot down every girl I have ever tried bringing home. And I certainly wouldn't react this way to my son bringing over a girl as intelligent and beautiful and kind as Kate is. At that moment, for the first time in my life, I began fully resenting my mom. I comforted Kate, kissing her forehead while she cried, telling her it was okay, and as soon as she calmed down, I stormed out of the car and headed straight up to my mom's front door. She opened it, and as soon as she saw me, a smile formed on her face. "You made the right choice, hon." "Fing, shut up." Her face went white when I interrupted her. "I don't understand." "No, I don't understand." I interrupted her again. "What is wrong with you? Are you in love with me or something? Do you fantasize about me? Is that why you used to come into my room at night and cuddle me? Is that why you can't let me see a single girl in my life? Is that why you forced me to cut off every single female relative?" My mom was stumped. Her face became even paler, and for a second I actually thought my words were connecting with her, until of course she turned sour again. "That's ridiculous. I just want you to understand that I raised you. No one else. The girls you pick need my approval. It's not my fault I have high standards." "High standards?" I exploded. "The first girl I ever brought over, you threatened to cull her if she didn't leave your baby boy to you and you only." "Oh, you're exaggerating," she said in her usual dismissive tone. "No, I'm not, Mom. I hate you. I never want to see you again. I want you to know that. I'm in love with Kate. She's going to be my girlfriend, and hopefully my wife, and the mother of my kids, and you're not stopping it." I didn't even let her respond. I walked out and started heading back to the car. I got back in, where Kate was wiping the last of the tears off her face. But as I put the key in, I heard Kate, "Oh my God, is that your mom?" My mom was running out of the house and towards my car. I revved up the engine as fast as I could, but it wasn't fast enough. My mom was by the window, and she was punching it, screaming at me to roll it down. But I didn't. I just started driving. On our way home, I was furious. My mom kept calling me. Kate was telling me she's sorry for embarrassing me and asking me if I was sure I still liked her. But all the noise around me simply came in one ear out the other, because I was going to have a relationship with Kate, and I was going to make my mom back off. The silence in the car was deafening as I drove us away from my parents' house. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Kate reached over and gently placed her hand on my arm, but I couldn't bring myself to look at her. Not yet. Not when I was this angry. My phone buzzed relentlessly on the dashboard. Call after call from my mother. I counted them as we drove. 23, 24, 25. Each vibration felt like another nail in the coffin of our relationship. By the time we reached Kate's apartment building, the count had reached 47. I pulled into the parking garage and turned off the engine. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone and powered it off completely. Kate watched me carefully, her eyes still red from crying. Inside her apartment, Kate moved to the kitchen and started making tea. Her hands trembled as she filled the kettle. I stood in her living room, staring at nothing, trying to process what had just happened. The violence in my mother's voice, the way she'd pounded on my car window, the pure hatred in her eyes when she looked at Kate. Kate brought me a cup of tea and we sat on her couch in silence. I noticed she kept glancing at the door, as if expecting my mother to burst through at any moment. Given what had just happened, I couldn't blame her. 20 minutes passed before either of us spoke. Kate set down her cup and turned to me. She started to apologize again for causing problems between me and my mother. I pulled her close and held her, telling her none of this was her fault. My mother's behavior was beyond anything I'd ever seen from her, and I was beginning to realize this went deeper than just overprotectiveness. We were still holding each other when the buzzer for Kate's apartment went off. We both froze. It buzzed again, then again. Kate's roommate Sarah was out of town, so it couldn't be her. The intercom crackled to life. Someone in another apartment had answered. I heard a woman's voice claiming there was an emergency and she needed to be let in immediately. My blood ran cold. I recognized that voice. Kate looked at me with wide eyes. She'd recognized it too. My mother had found us. She knew where Kate lived. The building door buzzed open. Kate and I sat frozen on the couch, listening. Soon we heard footsteps in the hallway. They stopped right outside Kate's door. Then the pounding started. The sound echoed through the apartment. My mother's voice followed, muffled but unmistakable through the door. She was calling my name, demanding I open up, saying she just wanted to talk, that she was worried about me. I stood up, my jaw clenched. Kate grabbed my arm, shaking her head, but I couldn't just sit there while my mother terrorized us. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. My mother stood there, her hair disheveled, her face red from exertion. I opened the door but kept the chain on. Through the gap, I could see her eyes light up when she saw me. Then her expression crumbled and she started sobbing. She collapsed against the door frame, saying over and over that she only wanted to protect me, that I didn't understand what I was getting into. Then she said something that made my blood freeze. She said Kate had filed a restraining order against an ex-boyfriend friend 2 years ago, that Kate was dangerous, that she'd done her research. I stared at my mother in disbelief. She'd been investigating Kate, digging into her past. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Behind my mother, I saw the building manager Bill approaching. I recognized him. He'd gone to high school with my mother. He put a hand on her shoulder and looked at me with concern. He suggested I hear her out, that she was just a worried mother. As he spoke, I noticed he'd positioned himself to block the stairwell. My mother had allies here. She'd been building them for years. I had to make a choice. Call the police and report her for harassment, knowing she had connections there too. Or handle this privately and try to de-escalate before things got worse. Looking at Bill's sympathetic expression toward my mother, I realized calling the police might not help. They'd probably know her from her volunteer work. They'd see a concerned mother, not a woman who'd just chased us across town. I made my decision. I told my mother I'd talk to her, but not here. We'd go down to Kate's car in the parking garage, somewhere semi-public but private enough to have a real conversation. My mother's tears dried instantly, and she nodded eagerly. Kate appeared behind me, and I could see the worry in her eyes. I whispered that I'd handle this and be right back. She nodded but stayed by the door, watching. In the parking garage, my mother immediately tried to get into the driver's seat of Kate's car. I blocked her and got in first, then let her in the passenger side. As soon as she sat down, she started rummaging in her purse, saying she had something to show me. She pulled out a stack of printed emails. My hands went cold as I recognized Kate's email address at the top. These were private emails between Kate and her ex-boyfriend from years ago. My mother had somehow accessed Kate's old email account. She thrust them at me, her voice taking on that familiar dismissive tone as she explained how a mother knows when another woman is dangerous, how she'd seen the signs, how she was protecting me from making a terrible mistake. I was still processing this violation of privacy when movement caught my eye. Kate stood at the driver's side window, holding up her phone. The recording symbol was clearly visible on the screen. She was documenting my mother's confession. My mother noticed too, but instead of panicking, she smiled, a cold, calculating smile that I'd never seen on her face before. While still in the car, my mother pulled out her own phone. Before I could stop her, she'd typed and sent a message. She showed me the screen. She'd texted my boss about my mental health emergency and how I needed immediate leave to deal with my crisis. My phone was off, but I knew the damage was done. My professional reputation was now at risk. Another notification popped up on her phone. She'd set it to show me. A text from my cousin Emma warning that my mother was gathering the family for an intervention tomorrow. The family was being mobilized against me. I grabbed my mother's purse, desperate to know what else she'd been planning. Inside, I found a small notebook. I opened it and felt sick. Page after page of surveillance notes about Kate, dating back 3 months, before I'd even introduced them. She'd known about Kate long before tonight. The notes were detailed. Kate's work schedule, her coffee shop preferences, her gym routine. There were even photos. Kate at work, Kate at the grocery store, Kate walking to her car. My mother had been stalking her for months. My phone, which I'd turned back on, started buzzing. Kate's veterinary school advisor was calling her. I could hear Kate answer from outside the car. Her face went pale as she listened. When she hung up, she mouthed to me that someone had made an anonymous complaint about her stability around animals. My mother was trying to destroy Kate's career. My father called next. His voice was calm, measured. He said my mother was just being protective, and that I should come home to talk things through reasonably. He'd always been the peacemaker, but this time his willingness to minimize her behavior made me furious. I got out of the car, taking my mother's notebook with me. She followed, protesting that I didn't understand the danger I was in. I walked away with Kate, leaving my mother in the parking garage. Back in Kate's apartment, I started going through my mother's notebook more carefully. Kate sat beside me, both of us horrified by what we found. But then Kate had an idea. She pulled out her laptop and logged into her social media accounts. What we discovered made everything worse. My mother had been commenting on Kate's posts from fake accounts for months. The comments had started out subtle, questions about her posts, friendly observations, but after we'd started dating, they'd escalated. Veiled threats, nasty insinuations, all from accounts with generic names and no profile pictures. My phone buzzed with a group text. My mother had sent a message to our extended family with photos from tonight, but the photos were carefully selected. They showed me yelling, my face contorted with anger. She claimed she was worried about my mental state and my safety with that woman. The responses started rolling in, aunts and uncles expressing concern, cousins offering to talk to me. My mother was turning the entire family against us. Then my supervisor called. He suggested I take the week off after my mother's concerning call about my stress levels. He said it kindly, but I could hear the worry in his voice. My mother had made me sound unstable. Kate needed to find a new doctor for a minor health issue, so she called a family practice that had been recommended. But when she gave her name, the receptionist's tone changed. She said they weren't accepting new patients. Kate pressed, mentioning the referral. The receptionist lowered her voice and said they didn't need the drama. When Kate asked what she meant, she mentioned that my mother had been a patient there for 20 years. My mother's influence was spreading like poison through every aspect of our lives. That night, I couldn't sleep. I created a fake social media profile and searched for my mother's name. What I found made my stomach turn. She was part of a Facebook group called Concerned Mothers of Adult Sons. I requested to join and was approved within minutes. The group was exactly what it sounded like. Mothers sharing stories about their adult sons, girlfriends, and wives. But as I scrolled through, I realized my mother was one of the most active members. She'd been sharing twisted versions of events for months, describing Kate as a predator who'd targeted her innocent son, claiming I was being isolated from my family. Over 50 local mothers had responded with sympathy and advice. Several recognized Kate from my mother's descriptions and promised to keep an eye out for her around town. The next morning, Kate's coworker Alexandra called with disturbing news. She'd noticed strange incidents at the veterinary clinic, medical supplies moved from their usual spots, Kate's lunch going missing from the staff refrigerator, and anonymous calls asking about Kate's work schedule. Alexandra mentioned these oddities had started right after Kate first mentioned having a boyfriend. I documented everything in a spreadsheet while Kate contacted her previous employers. 3 of them admitted receiving calls from someone claiming to be checking references for a government position Kate had supposedly applied for. The caller had asked probing questions about Kate's mental stability and relationships with coworkers. My phone rang constantly. Family members I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly concerned about my well-being. Each conversation followed the same pattern. They'd heard I was going through a crisis, that Kate was controlling me, that mom was beside herself with worry. I explained the truth to each caller, but most seemed skeptical. My mother had gotten to them first. Kate's elderly neighbor knocked on her door that afternoon. Mrs. Chen mentioned seeing a car matching my mother's description parked outside at odd hours over the past few weeks. She'd thought it strange but hadn't wanted to pry. When Kate showed her a photo of my mother, Mrs. Chen's face went pale. She confirmed it was the same woman she'd seen taking pictures of the building at 3 in the morning. We spent hours reviewing Kate's building security footage. The grainy images confirmed Mrs. Chen's observations. My mother's car appeared multiple times, always late at night. In one clip, we could see her getting out and walking around the building, looking up at windows. The timestamp showed this had been happening for months. My high school friend Jake reached out after seeing my mother's post in the family group chat. He revealed something that made my blood run cold. His younger sister had shown interest in me during our senior year. My mother had befriended her, then spread rumors about her being troubled and unstable. The girl had eventually stopped talking to her own family, convinced they'd turned against her. Jake's family had never understood what happened until now. Kate's roommate Sarah returned from her trip early after Kate explained the situation. Sarah immediately agreed to help document any suspicious activity. She installed a new doorbell camera and gave Kate pepper spray to carry. The three of us developed a system. Kate would never be alone, and we'd check in with each other throughout the day. That evening, my uncle called with a warning. My mother was planning something bigger. She'd been calling extended family members, claiming Kate was isolating me from everyone who loved me. She'd convinced several relatives that an intervention was necessary to save me from this dangerous woman. The family gathering was scheduled for the weekend. I started reaching out to family members individually, sharing the evidence we'd collected. Some listened, others remained convinced by my mother's narrative. My grandmother, however, surprised me. She admitted she'd seen this behavior before. My mother had done something similar with her own brother decades ago. He'd moved to Australia at 18 and never returned. The family had always wondered why. Kate discovered my mother had created multiple social media profiles to stalk her online presence. Each fake account had a detailed history, complete with photos and posts dating back years. My mother had put extraordinary effort into building these false identities. She'd used them to befriend Kate's friends, join groups Kate was part of, and gather information about her life. My supervisor called again. He mentioned my mother had sent several emails expressing concern about my mental state. She'd included photos of me looking disheveled and angry, all taken out of context. He suggested I consider taking extended leave to sort things out. My job was now in jeopardy. Kate's veterinary school professor mentioned something odd during her next class. He'd recently started dating someone new, a charming older woman who seemed very interested in his work and his students. When he showed Kate a photo from their last date, she nearly dropped her textbook. It was my mother. The pattern became clear. My mother was systematically infiltrating every aspect of Kate's life. She'd identified authority figures and was positioning herself to influence them. The professor mentioned his new girlfriend had asked many questions about his students, particularly about their mental health support systems. We decided to be proactive. I started backing up all our evidence, security footage, screenshots, recorded conversations, to multiple cloud services and physical drives. Kate began warning her study group about the situation. Most were supportive, but my mother had already reached out to some of them, offering to cater their study sessions. When they politely declined after Kate's warning, my mother sent them messages calling them ungrateful and rude. The police were our next stop. We filed a report about the stalking, showing them the security footage and documentation. The officer taking our report seemed sympathetic until he recognized my mother's name. She volunteered at their annual charity fundraiser. He suggested this was probably just a family dispute that could be resolved with communication. The report was filed, but I could tell nothing would come of it. Kate's best friend from high school flew in to visit after hearing about the situation. She'd escaped similar parental control and understood what we were facing. She shared her own story of breaking free from a possessive parent and offered practical advice. Her presence gave Kate strength, knowing she wasn't alone in this experience. My mother's college roommate reached out through social media. She'd seen my mother's post in the Concerned Mothers group and recognized the behavior pattern. 40 years ago, my mother had done the same thing to her boyfriend. She'd spread rumors, contacted his employer, and even showed up at his apartment at all hours. The relationship hadn't survived the harassment. I spent a day calling every woman I'd ever shown interest in during high school and college. The stories were eerily similar. My mother had befriended them, found their vulnerabilities, then exploited them. She'd spread rumors about eating disorders, family problems, mental health issues, whatever would make them seem unsuitable. Most had never understood why their social circles suddenly turned against them. Kate's lease renewal was denied without explanation. When she pressed for a reason, the building manager admitted someone had offered to pay 6 months' rent in advance if he didn't renew Kate's lease. He showed us the email. It was from my mother, though she'd used a fake name. The money trail led back to her personal account. My father finally called Kate directly. His hands shook as he spoke, admitting he'd seen this behavior for years but had always chosen to keep the peace. He revealed my mother had exhibited similar possessiveness with his brother when they first married. His brother had eventually moved across the country and cut contact. My father had convinced himself it was unrelated to my mother's behavior. During a family dinner I reluctantly attended, my grandmother confronted my mother directly. She stated plainly that she'd seen this sickness before and wouldn't watch it destroy another generation. My mother's mask slipped for just a moment, her face contorting with rage before she regained composure and played the victim. Kate and I grew closer through the ordeal. We developed routines to protect ourselves, checking in every few hours, varying our routes, documenting everything. Our relationship deepened as we faced this challenge together. I refused to let my mother's tactics drive us apart. My mother's attempts escalated. She offered to pay for couples therapy if I would just talk things through with a therapist of her choosing. When I declined, she sent the offer to Kate directly, along with articles about codependency and toxic relationships. I recorded our phone conversation where she admitted to sending these materials. The Concerned Mothers group became more active. Members shared sightings of Kate around town. They discussed her work schedule, her habits, where she shopped. It was a coordinated surveillance network, all feeding information back to my mother. I screenshot everything before my fake profile was discovered and blocked. Kate's study group stood by her despite my mother's attempts to turn them against her. They created a support network, ensuring Kate was never alone on campus. They took turns walking with her to her car and sitting with her during breaks. My mother's influence had limits. She couldn't turn everyone against us. My mother made a critical error during a church prayer group. While asking for prayers for her troubled son, she referred to me as my lover, instead of my son. The room fell silent. The slip revealed what several members had begun to suspect. Her feelings for me went beyond maternal concern. The priest later broke confidentiality to warn us about what he'd heard. Extended family members began reaching out with apologies. After my grandmother's revelation and my mother's public slip, they started seeing the pattern. Aunts shared their own observations from over the years. Cousins admitted they'd always found my mother's behavior concerning, but hadn't wanted to interfere. We compiled years of evidence into a comprehensive timeline. Other victims of my mother's harassment contributed their stories. The document grew to over 100 pages, detailing decades of manipulation and control. We organized it chronologically, showing the escalating pattern of behavior. Kate's lease situation forced a decision. We could leave town and start fresh somewhere else, or stay and fight. After long discussion, we chose to stay. Running would mean my mother won. We found Kate a new apartment with better security and stricter access controls. My mother's mask slipped again at my workplace. When security wouldn't admit her without an appointment, she caused a scene seen in the lobby. She screamed about being my mother and having rights. Security footage captured her threatening the guard and having to be escorted out. My supervisor called to check if I was safe. The stakes crystallized. This would end with someone broken or in custody. My mother's behavior was escalating beyond harassment into dangerous territory. Her options were shrinking as more people saw through her facade. She was becoming desperate. A lawyer sent a cease and desist letter on my mother's behalf, claiming I was defaming her with false accusations. I responded with our documented evidence. After reviewing the materials, the lawyer withdrew from representing her. He'd recognized the pattern of harassment and wanted no part of it. Family members began declining my mother's invitation to the intervention. As our evidence circulated and her behavior became more erratic, even her most loyal supporters started distancing themselves. The intervention was canceled when only 3 people agreed to attend. My mother's own words betrayed her. The emails, texts, and recorded conversations contradicted her public claims. She'd created a paper trail of her obsession that no amount of denial could erase. Truth was prevailing over her carefully crafted narrative. We finally had enough evidence for a restraining order. The judge reviewed our documentation, the stalking footage, the fake social media accounts, the harassment of Kate's employers in school. When my mother was served, she screamed in the courtroom that Kate had stolen her baby. The judge's decision stood. 3 days later, at 3 a.m., Kate's new security system sent an alert to our phones. The camera showed my mother in the parking lot of Kate's new apartment building. She was carrying a red gas can. We called 911 immediately. Police arrived within minutes. They found my mother attempting to jimmy the building's door with a crowbar. The gas can sat beside her. She was arrested for violating the restraining order and attempted breaking and entering. As they led her away in handcuffs, she screamed my name over and over. The morning after my mother's arrest, Kate's ex-boyfriend Sebastian showed up at her apartment. He stood in the doorway, shifting his weight nervously, explaining how my mother had contacted him months ago. She'd offered him money to reconcile with Kate, promised to help him win her back. He'd refused, but she kept calling, texting, even showing up at his workplace. He handed over screenshots of their conversations. My mother had been relentless in her attempts to reunite them. The prosecutor's office requested our complete evidence package. We spent the next 3 days organizing everything. Phone records that showed thousands of calls and texts dating back years, documentation of dozens of fake social media accounts, testimonies from 12 identified victims. The sheer volume filled multiple boxes. Kate's hands shook as she labeled each one. My father visited that evening, bringing divorce papers he'd already signed. He sat at our kitchen table, explaining how he'd finally accepted what everyone else had seen for years. My mother needed psychiatric help, not enablement. The family had collectively decided to pursue involuntary commitment proceedings for everyone's safety. 2 days into her custody, the jail called. My mother had attempted to harm herself, though the guards suspected it was staged. The shallow cuts on her wrists were in non-dangerous areas, and she'd made sure to do it right before shift change when she'd be discovered quickly. The hospital psychiatrist who evaluated her called me directly, begging me to visit. He said she was deteriorating rapidly without seeing me. I refused. Kate supported my decision, but some family members began wavering. My aunt called, suggesting I was being too harsh. My cousin texted that maybe one visit would help. The guilt campaign had begun, just as we'd expected. I documented each attempt, adding them to our ever-growing file. The following Monday, Kate returned to work alone for the first time in months. We were both anxious, but she needed to reclaim her independence. I spent the day pacing our apartment, checking my phone constantly. She texted every hour, letting me know she was safe. Her coworkers had created a protective circle around her, ensuring she was never isolated. The commitment hearing was scheduled for Thursday. I decided to attend, not to reconcile, but to speak the truth about decades of manipulation. Kate understood, though we both knew it would be difficult. I spent the night before writing out everything I wanted to say, though I knew I might not get the chance to say it all. The courthouse was packed. Victims, enablers, family members, and authorities all gathered in one room. My mother entered in restraints, her hair unkempt, her eyes wild. She looked around the room until she found me, and her face lit up with desperate hope. The hearing began with psychiatric testimony. The evaluating psychiatrist detailed my mother's condition: severe personality disorder with psychotic features, dangerous fixation patterns, complete inability to recognize boundaries. My mother alternated between denying everything and declaring that I was her soulmate, that we were meant to be together forever. Then she said something that changed everything. In the middle of a rambling speech about how she'd protected me from dangerous women, she mentioned my father's secretary who disappeared in 2010. She said the woman had tried to seduce him, tried to break up our family. She said she'd handled it, just like she always handled threats to our family. The courtroom went silent. My father's face drained of color. He stood slowly, his voice shaking as he confirmed his suspicion. His secretary Patricia had vanished without explanation 12 years ago. Police had investigated but found no leads. She'd simply disappeared one day after work. My mother had been the last person to see her, claiming Patricia had mentioned plans to move away. The judge ordered an immediate recess. Police detectives pulled my father aside for questioning. I sat frozen, processing this new horror. My mother had escalated from harassment to murder, and we'd never known. When court resumed, I was given the chance to speak. I stood on shaking legs, looking at my mother as I detailed years of manipulation, control, and escalation. I explained my decision. I supported psychiatric commitment with the condition of a full criminal investigation. My mother laughed, a sound that chilled everyone in the room. The judge's decision was swift. Immediate involuntary commitment to a secure psychiatric facility pending criminal investigation. My mother was carried out screaming my name, begging me to save her, declaring her eternal love. The sound echoed through the courthouse halls. That evening, my mother's final manipulation attempt came through her lawyer. She claimed to be pregnant with my child, demanding I take responsibility. The accusation was so outrageous, so impossible, that even her remaining supporters finally saw the depth of her delusion. Medical tests quickly disproved the claim, but the damage to her credibility was complete. Police searched my parents' home the next day. In the basement wall, behind a section of drywall that had been mysteriously replaced in 2010, they found human remains. Dental records confirmed it was Patricia. My mother was charged with murder while still in psychiatric custody. Faced with overwhelming evidence, my mother's lawyer negotiated a plea deal: 25 to life in a secure psychiatric prison, avoiding the death penalty. She signed the papers without emotion, still asking when she could see me again. The next months blurred together. Family therapy sessions helped us process decades of manipulation and trauma. My father moved into a small apartment, finally free but struggling with guilt over what he'd enabled. Extended family members came together, sharing stories and supporting each other through the healing process. Kate and I grew stronger through it all. We planned a small wedding with only trustworthy family members. My grandmother agreed to walk me down the aisle, saying she'd waited decades to see me free from my mother's influence. We chose her garden as the venue, a place of safety and genuine love. 3 weeks before our wedding, I received an email from Australia. My mother's brother, who'd fled the country at 18, had heard about everything through international news coverage of the murder case. He shared his own story of escape, how my mother had exhibited the same possessive behavior with him, how he'd barely gotten away, how he'd spent 40 years in therapy processing the trauma. We video called for hours. He showed me photos of his family, the life he'd built on the other side of the world. He apologized for leaving me behind, but explained he'd been just a teenager trying to survive. His story helped me understand that my mother's sickness went back generations. My mother's commissary letters arrived weekly at first, then daily. I returned them all unopened. The prison eventually stopped forwarding them at my request. I knew she'd never stop trying to reach me, but I could control whether her words entered my life. 2 years later, Kate and I married in my grandmother's garden. 30 people attended, carefully chosen family and friends who'd supported us through everything. My father stood alone in the back, tears streaming down his face. He'd finalized the divorce and started his own therapy journey. Kate's pregnancy announcement came 6 months after our wedding. We were having a daughter. As I placed my hand on Kate's growing belly, I made a promise. Our daughter would grow up with healthy boundaries, genuine love, and the freedom to be herself. The cycle of manipulation and control would end with us. I still attend therapy twice a month. The trauma doesn't disappear, but I've learned to process it in healthy ways. Kate and I built our life on a foundation of trust, communication, and mutual respect. Everything my mother had tried to destroy. My mother remains in psychiatric prison, her appeals denied. I haven't seen her since the commitment hearing and never will again. Sometimes I dream about her, wake up in cold sweats remembering her voice, but then Kate holds me, reminds me that I'm safe, that we're free, that our daughter will never know that kind of twisted love. The generational trauma stops here. Our daughter will know only healthy love, proper boundaries, and the freedom to live her own life. That's the only victory that matters. Breaking the cycle, choosing healing, and building something better from the ashes of what came before.